Welcome to this special interview with Julie Choo on the digital operating model of the future. As we imagine and plan for the architecture of tomorrow, digital operating models are an essential component of how organizations will deliver value and ultimately succeed. I'm delighted and honored to be interviewing Julie Choo here today, who is unquestionably a global expert on this topic. Julie is author of the book, The Strategy Journey, creator of the Strategy Journey Framework. We're going to see some slides and excerpts a little bit later on. And she is founder of the Stratability Academy. She spent over 20 years as a strategist and practitioner of business analysis and business architecture, moving from data analytics and software engineering into product and service design, portfolio management of operating model transformations, and M&A, and all that before venturing into entrepreneurship and supporting tech startups. She's held several strategic positions throughout her career. So in this session, we are going to explore what is a digital operating model, what does that entail, and what does it take for an organization to actually achieve it. So welcome, Julie. Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your wealth of experience and expertise.
Thanks. It's my pleasure. And it's always great to be working with you, Whynde, and I guess other like-minded architects at heart. So I'm really happy to have this opportunity to share some of my experiences for the benefit of everybody.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. So to ground our conversation and make sure that everybody listening shares a common understanding, I have to ask, what is the definition of an operating model?
Well, I get asked this question a lot, and I tend to always start off with trying to explain what's the difference between the business model and the operating model, and the fact that they're actually not the same thing. So I actually talk about this on my blog. The two models actually work together, one being the strategy that drives how a business or the organization forward into a certain direction and how it actually makes money and operates in a certain way. So, that's the business model. And actually the operating model is what delivers this business model. So it's the execution engine that actually drives those activities in the business that runs the design, the build, the testing, the delivery of all the different value propositions, and actually gets it out to all the different customers, the users, and even internal stakeholders. So it's, this is a huge saying that strategy is nothing without execution. And so the business model is nothing without the operating model, but vice versa, of course. And that's one analogy, the engine that I really like to use. Another one is, think of it almost like the heart, in the human body, and it's just pumping all this blood around the human body into all these different functions, like the brain and everything else. The brain's got the intelligence and the smarts, but you kind of need the heart to pump, the blood everywhere else, and everything's actually happening. Everything is coordinating, everything, is working based on the fact that there is actually a heart pumping everything around. So, and with that analogy, I like to, push forward this fact that you have to have a healthy heart, so you actually have to have a healthy operating model. And it's not just about making money, it's about all these other facets to it that are kind of, very, very important to get right, and especially in the times that we are in today. So, loads of other people also think the operating model is comprising all these activities, people, processes, data, systems, etc. And that's one of the definitions that I actually put in the book as well.
So with that as the backdrop of what an operating model is, then the key question is, what is a digital operating model? And for an organization, what does that look like? What can we observe? What can they do? How does an organization with a digital operating model behave?
Well, if we take the analogy again of the engine, then you can have an engine for a car, a plane, a ship, even a spaceship today. And so this engine comes in different shapes and different forms. And the digital operating model is this new form of operating model where it operates at its most optimal using the latest tools and the latest techniques that the digital world actually brings to us. And so it's really all about the operating model being able to actually perform and change digitally. So it's really much more about digital transformation than just having an operating model. Can your operating model support your digital transformation efforts? So, how does it contribute to digital transformation? Does it have the ability to transform and create outcomes? And it's really about not just technology, but also practices. So one of the key things we all know, everybody in this audience that we're talking to, we're majority of us are architects or in this space, and we all know technology is really an enabler. And the truth is, so are processes and systems. The key fact is digital operating models is not about technology. It's actually about people. It's about people being able to operate, to think, act, and behave with the aid of these tools and these enablers in a digital way, and actually bringing businesses forward, transforming them forward digitally.
Great. I'll just give a backdrop on that one as well. So what value would you say that organizations can expect to see by operating with digital services and a digital operating model?
Well, so I think one of the key things I want to point out, and actually that might be coming up in the slide that you've got showing at the moment, is that we're really not, there has been an evolution of operating models from what was economies of scale for a period of time. We've had decades of organizations looking at transforming using automation, using systems thinking, and then actually in the last in the last few years or the last decade, there's been this shift towards this concept of a digital twin because of the birth of AI and big data. And as I said, digital operating models is next level. It's not just a digital representation using technology of what could be the way that you operate, a hypothesized version of it. It's a living, breathing mechanism where your people are actually operating digitally using whatever tools, including AI or whatever else that you want to. So with that, the organization is actually operating with high levels of maturity and digital, and agility. And the real benefit is, the value is that you get ultimate competitive advantage. I mean, imagine having the ability to not just have this digital twin where you have the data to predict what might happen, but actually living and breathing it. So, your people are actually automatically not reacting, but literally it's like a metamorphosis of just continuously changing because of the data that you're actually getting. It's just a living and breathing style of running an organization, and that's very, very different from just having machines do it and people do things separately, and then or having a machine do some predictive analytics for you. This is now the living and breathing version of the operating model.
Absolutely. And what companies would you say are operating this way today with a digital operating model, or are you even seeing governments operating this way as well?
Well, without a doubt, I think everybody knows that some of the top tech companies are living and breathing versions of this digital operating model. I think Amazon would be the absolute prime example of this, because it's using Alexa home speakers to listen to everything that we're actually doing. But if you think about it, then, Tesla is doing exactly the same thing, albeit only when we're in the car and we're driving a Tesla. It has the ability to sense what you're doing. So if you have a look at all the other companies out there who might be doing some mergers and acquisitions or M&A activity, what sorts of companies, what sorts of technologies are they actually buying or looking to buy or looking to bring in-house, bring in those sorts of capabilities into their company? Then you can already see that that's where they're leading towards, because this ability to listen to people, to customers, to what they're doing, what sorts of problems they actually have, and then actually work out and support them with the right services is exactly, what it's all about. And you see that, you see Amazon literally doing that every day. You see actually a lot of other companies doing that, that have started doing that as a result of maybe not in such an advanced way through Alexa, but have a look at how we as a global community have adapted using technology to support our businesses as a result of the pandemic. Look at how far we've changed. Look at how far the way that we work and operate, intercompany, etc., has advanced almost, by two decades, some would say. So it's not the same. And when it comes to governments, well, which governments out there are claiming or proposing smart cities? So I talk about that. One of the countries that I've have had a lot to do with, being Singapore, and it's pushing very fast forward in being a smart city. But yes, the Tokyo Olympics wasn't as well attended as we'd wanted it to during COVID, but Tokyo was certainly another smart city that was pushing in that direction, and there are several others. So, how are they actually embracing technology is very, very interesting. Singapore, for example, has some great examples where they're literally creating digital community centers and putting IoT devices in people's homes, especially for the elderly, and actually having community health programs to support what would happen. Now, I think that actually that possibly has helped them during COVID, because they've actually already got community centers and all people perfectly capable of doing first aid, geared to actually send their friends and family to hospitals very quickly. So, it's all, they've thought about these things in advance and then looked at what technology could do, from CCTV cameras to their own versions of Alexa to VR services, etc., to support what are the problems that community or those countries are actually facing. And this is really what it's all about. Companies will succeed, be it space travel, be it anything else, based on really getting in there and understanding what customers, users, and other staff, even if you're thinking about internal services or B2B businesses, what are the problems and journeys that people are actually undergoing, and so what services and what solutions could you offer them?
God, those are great examples. So, of course, our big question is how do we actually get there, especially for an organization that's been around for a long time and is transforming. So, what are the steps an organization needs to take to evolve towards digital operating model maturity and agility that you were talking about? And I know we have a really savvy audience here, right? That's very tech savvy, business model savvy. So how would you describe this journey towards maturity and agility, maybe to an executive?
Sure. So hopefully everybody already knows that maturity and agility aren't the same thing. And if we take that as a baseline, then we need to understand that you can actually measure your level of maturity, and you can also measure your level of agility. Even though some of the language that you would use in, how we've actually typically in the past looked at maturity levels could be applied in the same way. The difference is how you get into the data, into the operating model components, and describe the maturity of those components, and then how those components and what level of maturity you need to support the agility that you desire. So agility is the outcome, maturity is the state that you're actually in. And we've got very tech savvy audience here, so I'm talking about states, and then I'm talking about outcomes. I'm talking about inputs and outputs. So hopefully that will make it really, really clear to everybody that maturity is effectively the state. It's got all the various different inputs that we need to look at, and the outcome and the output is actually the agility level that you desire. And the tricky and hard part to this whole process is that there are organizations who you're in level 1 maturity, you're in silos, okay? You are still, after decades at best, at level 3 in process driven, okay? Because you focus for decades on systems thinking, which has been great for us, and automation. And you've gone down the route of tech, automation, process re-engineering, then now data, and actually to some extent cast people aside. And I would say that, the difference in a digital operating model is that you flip the whole thing around. It's about people first. Then what those people can intelligently do if you offer them the right data to look at, and then they'll go about intelligently to execute the right processes that you need, and the right activities in the organization, and use the right tech to support them. It's the other way around. You've got to give people the opportunity to be the brilliant ones, because the truth is, we all know everybody in this audience is one of those brilliant people out there who could make that difference to their organization and their company. And so every other person who works in an organization should be in an empowered role where they have the opportunity to actually, perform innovation or work in a collaborative fashion and do what I, very much call co-creation. Now, I've talked about all the different levels, and the hardest part of it is, what if you're trying to jump 2 levels or 3 levels? Is that even a possible thing? And obviously, the further away you are from, where you are today and where you want to go, then it's going to cost more money, it's going to take more time, and it's going to be, much more challenging. So if you think about your resources and the effort, yes, it's going to be big. Is there a faster way? Well, yes, because if you have a look at the way the world has gone, and how the cloud and all the different tech actually has supported us to unbundle services and rebundle them, then I think the mindset that needs to change if you're operating digitally or with a digital operating model is that you don't have to do it all. You don't have to be the dominant one, offering every single solution out there and owning the entire value chain of all the different services and capabilities. What you have to do is become the best at what you do, and then work with your partners, your competitors, your non-competitors, and look at the other services, and then help each other and co-create. And this is obviously into organization if you were looking to serve a challenging problem. But if you were looking to maybe look at a B2B service, or a service, solve an internal issue, look at the differences between verticals versus horizontals in organizations, and you have a look at Amazon, again being the prime example, with web services becoming, the horizontal that became the biggest vertical in the world. Well, have a think about and have a look at all the different things that you do, and do you have any existing services that might be a small function that serves only certain parts of your organization, but actually it's best practice? Could you turn that horizontal effectively into the next biggest, greatest vertical, and partner with your other competitors in other industries, etc.? So the way you transform is, it's not this big, huge transformation effort that necessarily dictates forever and these long, giant roadmaps. It's entirely possible to do it one service at a time. Look at your competitive advantages, look at what you're good at, and move forward with those, and actually form new value chains, new ways of doing things. Form new mini operating models for new services, and take this iterative co-creation approach of working with all your industry partners and bundling and unbundling. I'm very, very pro co-creation, for sure.
I love it, and I love how you flip the model around and put people first. I think that's certainly the way forward. So I know that an organization's culture and ways of working are a critical foundation to actually make this work. And I wonder if you can speak to mindset and culture and the things that need to be in place for those organizations.
Well, this is a really, a big deal in today's world. And actually, it's weirdly, I've been launched a program last year, a new program called Transforming Operating Models with Service Design, which is actually one of the paths or roadmaps of transformation that I talk about in the book. And there's an entire, 3-month and 6-month program for people to come and actually work with myself and Graham Christensen, my co-author, to apply some of the various different methodologies that we talk about in the book, but practically in depth with a case study. And what we noticed in last year's cohorts was that all the questions were about, how do I do this in this situation? How do I speak to this person? What, I don't know if my organizational culture can support this. I don't know how to get this amount of funding. It's people issues, it's cultural issues that are actually blocking the ability for digital transformation and the achievement of this utopian digital operating model, if you want to call it that. I mean, sometimes I do like to use my space analogies to talk about these things because I'm a big Star Trek geek. So, I'm always going to bring up spaceships and SpaceX and, the fact that we've actually got all these billionaire entrepreneurs, actually creating spaceships and these new operating models and new ways of doing things all the time now. So, how do you change the culture? Well, you lead, obviously, you lead well, but you have to create a collaboration and learning culture. It's about actually changing the mindset of people to go down the route of, well, what could I learn from this experience? How could I learn together? How could I share this experience? So, I think I mentioned in the book several co-creation techniques and what is co-creation. And if you have a look at the list of techniques, there are some really old traditional techniques that you were like, oh, that's just marketing, that's just a survey. And guess what? That's co-creation. Listening to your customers any way possible, listening to your users, listening to your stakeholders, and truly understanding what their problems are is co-creation, and actually giving them the chance to explain their problem to you, not necessarily pushing a solution on them, but actually really, really getting into it and understanding what they want, and then actually meeting and exceeding their expectations. Now, if you are going down the route of transformation or building solutions that you've already predetermined, it's like in some cases, and we're in this case in our world, especially on the tech side, there's a lot of technology out there, kind of, with no users. Okay, there's a lot of technology that doesn't have a use case or a business case that warrants interest and adoption by customers, users, and stakeholders, and internal customers as well. So how does technology, or any service, be it technology or not, get people to adopt it? It does this by going, being problem specific, service led, and value driven. If you can follow these three principles, which I talk about in depth, and show people how to do within my program to practice this co-creation, then that's actually how you can really change culture. It's not just, oh, I'm going to have more meetings, or I'm going to have a big town hall saying we're going to do a new culture, or have a new culture officer. There is a program of change through education and through behaving differently and actually practicing all of these different activities and putting yourself in other people's shoes, and really sort of, building a growth mindset that's actually necessary to change the culture and to make that a reality in organizations. And obviously, the further backwards you are, then the bigger the change. But if you got more people involved in collaborating and innovating together using maybe some of the co-creation techniques that I've listed, for example, start by putting people in hackathons. It's a competitive environment, but at the same time, you don't win in the hackathon if you don't actually collaborate with people to solve a problem. So, it's forced collaboration to achieve an outcome, and it's one step closer to, what I call the co-created innovation, where it's like this Amazon listening style metamorphosis, Star Trek, whatever, creature change, where the being, the object, the company literally just adapts itself automatically based on different pieces of data that come in, and people are looking at, oh, that's an opportunity. Could we get together and offer a new service to solve this problem for these people? Oh, we've just had these X number of data points, that we've heard about from people behaving a certain way. Is there a potential problem that would lead us to develop a new solution for a problem that people didn't really know that existed? I don't know, hypothetical, let's say, a billion IoT devices were suddenly realizing that all of us have bad sleeping patterns. That might actually be a reality, by the way. It's just an analogy. But let's say that was an example. Then that's, enough data to inspire and motivate a whole bunch of people to actually look for a solution for the fact that there is 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people or 1,000,000,000 people with a lack of sleep. And it's a brand new magnificent service. But the thing is, like, a lot of these people who have had bad night's sleep have the app. They might know it. They may not have literally gone out there and actually looked for a solution to help them to sleep, but you know about it. You could offer one to them. So the cultural change is that it's a living and breathing thing, and that's what I believe the digital operating model is all about. It's actually a cultural organization. It's an operating model that is based on people, like, not machines, even though it's got the word digital in front of it.
Well said. I love that you keep bringing it back to the people, whether they're customers or partners or employees. I've heard you talk about DBS Bank as a case study around culture and things like that. I wonder if you want to just speak a bit about that.
Yeah, so DBS, it's one of the case studies in the book, and DBS has, I think, maybe it's roughly been about a decade now. They're a change, and they actually won Best Digital Bank 2017, I believe. But prior to that, I think maybe you talk about 5 years, they had a bad reputation for being a very slow bank. Apparently, the new global COO got into a taxi when he got his new job in Singapore, and his taxi driver told him, "Oh, you're the new COO of DBS Bank. Good luck. It's going to be very, very slow." And they've really moved leaps and bounds in how they've actually transformed the organization. Yes, there's marketing, there's branding. DBS actually calls itself a 22,000 person startup, but there is the essence of a startup culture in there. I'll bet they are a smaller bank. You can see that in the way they treat their customers, the way that they started to understand the customer journey of customers for banking. Now, one of the things, this is kind of one of the areas that I look into a lot, because I've been in fintech for a very, very long time. Banking is a utility service. It's a boring service. People go to the bank to bank their money, take things out, have mortgages. There's nothing sexy or exciting about your banking activities at all. So how does a bank offer interesting services that are digital, or does a bank actually take away banking and make banking disappear? Okay, literally a background activity to sort of make people not worry about their finances. Can a bank actually do that? And apparently that was the challenge that DBS's management set to their people. How do you save customers time in the time and effort that they spent transacting and interacting with the bank? Because that's actually what makes the customer happy. And once they did that and reduced the amount of wasted time in serving customers, then they actually could focus on activities that are related to banking, like shopping. Okay, that actually people would rather spend their time doing. We know people spend a lot of time shopping online, or even in real shops. So they started looking at, well, could the bank integrate and partner with shopping malls, with different online services to support people's consumerism and other digital experiences? Could the bank form a part of that? So this mixing, this bundling and unbundling of services, and seeing the fact that DBS's other effective, efficient services that have literally disappeared, but could reappear in little places along a shopping journey, that is solving other problems for other people, is exactly the kind of thing that they did. It's very, very interesting. And they actually went into that to ask the people inside of the company to imagine, when you speak to the customer based on what they complain about, what might they want? What could the bank do for them that would exceed their expectations of the banking journey itself? So yeah, really, really great example.
Brilliant. So as we think about ways of working in culture and mindset, how do you think we get beyond concepts such as business and IT alignment, or treating the IT organization as sort of an enabler or support department, and how do we actually shift towards doing the sort of co-creation, business technology co-creation, these ideas that you've been talking about?
Well, I think it's really about the engagement model. So I know it might be contentious because there's lots of organizations out there with matrix models. Okay, and then there was another organizational design or organizational methodology called holacracy, which threw that all over the place. But what I would say is you need an engagement model, and it still has to be supported by governance. But I go back to, go back to base principles. I go back to change your levers, change the way you measure the organization to drive the right sorts of activities, remove boundaries, make it those three principles of being problem specific, service led, and value driven. That creates this collaborative culture. I'm solving problems for other people. That's the default position that I take. I'm being measured on my ability to solve problems for other people, not for myself or what I get paid in, or where I am in the organizational hierarchy. I am being paid and rewarded based on how many problems I solve for whom, all over the place. And I am there. My job is to provide a service in any bundle, in any value chain, in any value stream, any situation. It has a value. I have value. I contribute. What I do matters, and it can't be replaced by a machine. Okay, a machine can support me to do a better job than I'm already capable of doing. That's the difference. You've got to have that kind of mindset and that engagement model of going, that's how people should think. It's very similar to the growth mindset concept, rather than the fixed mindset concept that psychologist Carol Dweck talked about. But it's now taking that into an organization and looking at how you apply it. That's one change that has to happen. And then you have to look at, well, when you're actually working together on different projects, on different things, how do you actually speak to your stakeholders? How do you present things to your stakeholders? Now, I ran a workshop a few years ago with a huge global pharmaceutical company, and they had their, 15 enterprise architects fly from around the world to have, I think, their team bonding event at the same time as actually sitting with me for a week to work on what sorts of services that this architecture practice and team are going to deliver to the rest of this global organization of 200,000 people. Okay, I'm giving a couple of hints as to who it might be, but without actually saying who they actually are. And one of the things we did was we had a look at the co-creation method and what does it actually take to co-create. And we had some architects from the procurement department go, you know what, I never ever thought of my stakeholders as my customers. I was like, well, why not? They're your customers. Mm-hmm. So you're spending all of your time doing this. And yes, it's very, very big, deep, involved data analytics work, but you've spent 2 years working on it. Could you, take a different MVP approach and actually start speaking to your users and your customers, even for some of it, so that they're not waiting 2 years for you before you're ready to actually deliver them anything? Could you deliver some things to them based on, immediate need? What that might be why they're not speaking to you, and they're trying to go and, work with a different consultancy to, when in fact, as an architecture practice, you're effectively an internal consultant. So, these are the sorts of things that can actually happen. And this collaboration culture, when he realized that if I spoke to them like customers and actually said, this is what I can do for you, and outline what my services actually are, and actually say that, this is the MVP, can I really start doing this for you? They're probably going to say yes. So, and rather than, I'm the police, I'm a procurement department. They come to me when they need something. And it's about getting through the procurement process so that they're allowed to actually make this procurement or acquisition or buy this piece of software or work with this vendor. So it's just completely changing the way that you think and operate in a very, very collaborative way and following a co-creation style. It's too detailed to get into actually what actually happens in this workshop and in this session, but that just sort of highlights a way that you can practice this style of co-creation. And again, if you have a think about horizontals and verticals, and I'll keep playing back to the Amazon example, what was the challenge? Apparently historically, when I was doing the research for the book, Amazon what was Amazon Web Services was an internal horizontal that was rather ineffective and efficient. And it was challenged to become an external service, to start to basically not only service Amazon internally, but to service everybody else out there in the world. And guess what? It succeeded. It's actually the most powerful horizontal in the world that is now every other organization's horizontal. Everybody, including secured banks, investment banks, are all, I would not, maybe not everybody, but I would say, significant portion of the world is on AWS. So, what does that tell you? It's possible. And it really just moves back to, you've got to think about, the business design side of the world has actually been pushing towards IT this concept of human-centered design. I think there has always been this separation between the business and technology as to how do you actually apply human-centered design together. And I think that this is the way that you've got to think about human-centered design. It's, again, back to those principles. What's the problem or the value proposition? Okay, how does that mix in a sweet spot with the customers, the users, the partners, and how does that mix with staff and systems? And actually, you need to treat people and systems as almost the same thing, because you've got humans and machines learning together, working together to support customers. So I think ultimately, you've got to really understand how to apply human-centered design properly, and moving forward with this co-created innovation mindset. That's really how you can operate with a digital operating model and move forward.
Outstanding. This interview has been absolutely incredible, and all of your insights, but I think you've really reshaped our mindsets a little bit as well. So, Julie, do you have any final closing words of wisdom or inspiration that you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I think, I've said it several times, we are definitely in the world where we've got to put people first. That is the most important thing. We've got to put people first, we've got to invest in people, and we've got to look at allowing people to keep learning so that we're all learning and we're all improving and able to make changes and use digital technology as best possible to support us. And, that's what's going to really make that difference. Whether you want to call it mindset, whether you want to call it everything else, some people call it digital first, I call it people first.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your valuable time and expertise here with all of us. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us just to thank you for all of your unique and extensive contributions of thought and leadership to this particular area. So thank you so much, and we'll look forward to dialoguing with everyone after this.
Sure.
Great. So with that, sorry, I just have me and Julie. Are you out there? You want to show your screen? Perfect. Great. Good to see you, and a welcome in a very early morning for you. So it's a special treat to have you here. I know it's really, really early your time. So how are you doing?
Yeah, okay. Hopefully I'm awake enough to answer people's questions.
I think so. It was a great talk. So we have a few so far, and we'll let more come in. So everyone, please do put your questions for Julie in the question tool, and we'll take as many as we can. So the first question is around value, and we have a follow-up to this one as well. So well understood what an operating model is. Can you elaborate on the value of what it is and how it will be delivered sustainably? And so really just commenting on the value. We get the what, but a little bit more on the why.
Okay, well, I think what's important when it comes to value is that you have the right levers by which you measure what value is. So value is about the outcomes that you produce with the operating model, not the activities themselves. So it's the outcomes that you would have for your customers, your users, and your stakeholders as well. And what those values are, it could be whatever it is that you want to define, but there's a whole range of different types of values. So in the strategy journey book, I actually talk about 4 types of values that are outcomes that could be produced by the operating model, but also other value measures that are actually what you would use to measure the value that you're producing. So those 4 outcomes are business value, obviously, financial value, which is different from business value, customer value, and also social value. But internally within the operating model itself, and as part of what I call the mission model, when you're actually defining, well, this is a direction we're going to go forward in the organization, by which we would measure ourselves, our performance, and what we're going to do. Then there are 6 other value measures that I hold. I would say the organization should be thinking about when they're thinking about measuring their value measures. So the first 3 are well known, and they have been talked about in the Harvard Business Review, customer centricity, product innovation or product leadership, and operational excellence. They have been around for ages. Loads and loads of organizations use these 3 value principles, value measures, to measure themselves or to direct their activities. But I think that if you only focus on these 3 and not take a more well-rounded approach that I would say are important factors in a digital operating model, then you're kind of missing it. I think those are potentially still, they're not potential, they're still very, very valid value measures, but you have to actually add all the modern dimensions that we have in the digital world today. So one thing for sure is you have to look at the assets in the organization. So what's the asset value? Can you actually grow? Can you produce value from the assets that you have? And again, in the book, I have a specific outline of the different types of assets that you could actually measure the performance of an overall organization in. And it's not just how effective or efficient are your processes, what's your revenue. It's things like, what are the people? Who are the people that you have? Again, I go back to this people first thing. What's the brand that you have? What's the correlation between your capabilities, your people, and your brand? These are the other assets that are actually highly measurable in your organization that produce the value. And one of the examples that I love to use about people and branding, and these components being a key component to the overall value that is produced, is, being a woman, we love our handbags. And I used to shop from this brand called Mulberry. And I remember seeing on the internet the day that the creative director left Mulberry, and I think she went to Apple after she left, the share price dropped a significant portion. So that means that the share price of Mulberry was attributed to this brilliant person and this brilliant lady alone. And similarly, you have other brands. We've just talked about fashion, so let's talk about what happened to the share price of Formula One, another one of my favorite interests. And the day that Sebastian Vettel left Ferrari to move to a different team, it impacted the share price of Formula One, possibly Ferrari, for a period of time. Obviously, they recover, but this, again, brilliant person, this brand ambassador, this person with specific knowledge and ability and capabilities in driving the business forward in a specific way, leaving the organization, leads to a change in the brand equity and also impact to the rest of the operations. Now, these are just sort of simple, isolated, siloed examples, but that's exactly the issue. If you ever have an organization that is in silo or that is working in silos, that has dependencies on individuals of brilliance without having invested in the entire capability in the organization to be able to move on, then that's when you've got troubles. So asset value is important. We've got financial value, and as part of what I've just talked about, the last and most important thing is you need to measure your digital transformation or your business transformation ability as well, and measure your maturity, measure your agility. These are all the sorts of other levers that are typically not considered when people are projecting, oh, these are my targets that I'm going to do in the next couple of years. So, value comprises all of these different facets and components, and it's important to consider them.
Absolutely. Well, sort of not a follow-on, but a little bit of a related thread. When you were talking about the maturity model, there was an observation that it seems to be capability based. So maybe you can validate that. And if it is capability based, how is that helpful if you don't know what the value creation maturity is? So if you want to speak to that.
So the maturity model is certainly capability based, and I would say value creation sits within a specific capability that your organization has. So if there's capabilities are not specific to any area, they are specific to, there are capabilities that support both verticals and horizontals. And if you think about strategy and planning or business architecture or enterprise architecture or any of these other functions or capabilities within an organization, they are capabilities. Teams of people performing specific activities, responsible for the strategy, then value creation has to sit inside of these specific functions with the right people to be able to carry these things forward. And so you have to have these areas define the other values or support the organization to define the other values as part of their own value proposition. So if you think of enterprise architecture, business architecture, strategy and planning, or any other business analysis based function as a capability, and it has customers that it serves. These areas serve internal customers. The internal customers are the board, are the other areas, is IT, it's the business lines. All these other areas expect you to produce value for them. What is that value? It is actually in how you define potentially the value creation activities for the rest of the organization or for them, and to help them define when they're working on things, when they're actually performing, when they're doing things, what are the value measures that they should be measured on or they should be performing to. So you have a big role here to play.
Cool. We had a couple questions on digital twin that you were talking about. So I'm just going to read one out to you exactly on this one. And we're going to save some time too, because Paul has a question or two for you at the very end. So by digital twin, are you referring to the operational or sort of the shop floor sensing capabilities, or the broader digital twin of the organization, looking at both inside and outside / demand side of the organization? So maybe you can elaborate a bit more there.
Yeah, okay. So the digital twin, if you take the main definition of what it actually is a digital representation of what the organization is. And if you actually Google, the definition of digital twin, the main definition that they give you is that it's a data-driven, AI-based, predictive analytics model of what the organization actually is. Okay, so it means that you are potentially implementing different ways of measuring how customers externally, users externally, or as well as staff, users, and internal customers are all performing, and then you predict what might happen. That's a very sophisticated implementation of the digital twin. And you look at that holistically, and you predict. If you are getting to that level of sophistication, then you really are starting to get into that very, very predictive and intelligent maturity level of what we've defined as the 5 maturity levels for capability measurement. And if you then have people involved in supporting this digital twin with all of these different viewpoints that you have to support what they actually do, and you have that added layer of the cultural element where they are thinking digitally, using all of this data and information to support their activities, they're also empowered to act on things and inject their work and their ideas into a digital ecosystem that also supports them to be creative, to innovate, to improve services for customers on the fly, and actually be rewarded for it at exactly the same time. And it's all symbiotic and it's all natural. Then that's when you reach what I think I mentioned when we were speaking earlier about the utopia of the digital operating model. So it's one step closer, and that additional human intelligence adaptability dimension is not currently really talked about in or mentioned or considered to be part of the digital twin just yet. And so that's the main difference. That's that additional element. It's really about taking just analytics and going, oh, okay, we can predict all of these things, and getting to a level of, it's not just we predict these things and then we can act on it. It's we're already predicting these things. It's part and parcel of living and breathing and what we do and how we run our organization. And we already have the processes, the capabilities in place to act on it. Intelligent capabilities with intelligence, with intelligent people going around saying, if this sort of happens, I have the bandwidth to be able to do and act on it and do these sorts of things. And there is a rough order of magnitude of things that are, a range of things that I would be allowed to do, obviously with compliance in mind, with regulation in mind. Okay, we don't want people to go too crazy. Some boundaries, a set of boundaries or guidelines as to how I can actually take my intelligence and my intuition, my initiative forward based on the data that's presented to me to continuously improve services on the fly for customers and users.
Thank you. Well, I have one more question here that's, we'll have a time for one more here that's kind of specific. And then after this one, Paul, I'll welcome you to come on and ask some of your own. So what if the business stakeholders do not understand value streams? How do you explain the strategic value of capabilities without the connection to a value stream framework? Maybe mapping process diagrams to capabilities question.
Okay, so when it comes to stakeholder management, most stakeholders don't really want to get into the detail. They do want things to be very, very high level, succinct, and to get to the point so that you can show them the value of what it is that they're actually going to get. Stakeholders tend to be very outcomes driven and also problem specific, service led, and value driven. So I wouldn't necessarily speak to them in the language of, oh, here's a value stream that I've just drawn for you. In fact, that's probably going to quite bore them. And this is a set of your capabilities. Some of them will say, oh, okay, those are processes. And actually, technically, capabilities are in a hierarchy of processes at the conceptual and logical level. But the thing is, if you're talking about very senior stakeholders, and I have this as a section in the book as well, where I have a Zachman style diagram, and I talk about where I've actually, I think one of my readers actually told me that I've inversed, because it's adapted, the conceptual and contextual layers around. So I say that the top level, which is the level that's associated with your executives, your very, very top management, as the contextual level, followed by conceptual, logical, physical, and then action and implementation. And then there's also a one that spans across all of it, which is the experiential layer, which is what customers and users actually work on or provide. And so if you have a look at all of these different architecture layers of any enterprise or organization, being 6 of them, the senior stakeholders and the business are interested only in the top 2. Contextual, what is the problem? How are you going to serve me, and what value am I going to get? And the business management level will maybe go down, the business management areas, the business themselves, the business leads, the business line leads will care one level below that, which is, okay, that's the context that senior management gave me. That's what I have to perform to. These are the services that I'm going to be delivering to our customers, or products that I deliver. So what are the key functional components or capabilities that matter to my service and my service only, okay? And perhaps other capabilities or other services internally of which I have a dependency on, or which have a dependency on me. So who are my customers, internal and external, I care about these. So whether you want to use the word capability or function or other business area or team to describe all these other things, you need to use the language of the organization as it is. People don't necessarily want to be fixated on language. It's about the outcomes, the problems. And if you approach your stakeholders in a way to say, okay, this is how I can serve you. These are some of the things that I've identified. This is your problem. This is a way forward. These are the outcomes you're going to get if you move forward in this direction. Then I can't see any stakeholder having a problem with that if you take this approach. It was actually, I think in the earlier example I talked about this procurement department that I worked with as part of an overall technology or enterprise architecture and technology organization, struggling to actually have conversations and for business stakeholders to take their services on board. A very typical situation would be business stakeholders would have a sense of urgency, and they see potentially an internal capability or function as being a bit slow, or the police, and so they go out and they hire another consultancy quickly. Now, I'm not saying don't go and hire another consultancy. We want them to, but it should be done in co-creation, because typically you should hire another consultancy to bring on a level of expertise that you don't have internally to support you to grow that and to improve that, not to literally do exactly what an internal capability can do side by side, just because they're not servicing you in the right way. And so this then lies in the capability itself, or the function, the procurement division. It means that your customers don't understand you or what your service actually is. So that's why they're seeking an alternative. It's almost like a whole open market, market situation. You are another vendor, whether you're internal or not. Stakeholders maybe in the past were forced to use you, no matter how ineffective or inefficient you may be. You have to up your game, just like Amazon Web Services did, and serve your internal stakeholders as well as you would serve external stakeholders and become truly competitive. Otherwise, you're not going to survive.
Well, I know we have like 1 minute. We do have to stop at the top of the hour, and then I'm going to be turning over to Roman to host the next session. So, Paul, did you want to throw out a quick question?
Well, it'll have to be very quick. Sorry, my questions are never that quick, so I'll maybe we can invite Julie back. But I do see, and I wonder if you agree. At least we can make it. Maybe we make it true or false. Do you see a difficulty in translating the value measures that technologists use? And I don't just mean IT. I mean technologists and digital natives use into the value measures that other business units use. I've always disliked the notion of the business and IT, because we work for the same company. But tell me, what do you see, or do you see that as a significant challenge? And if so, maybe in a terse way, how can we move beyond it?
It is definitely a challenge, because it does all come down to language. And as I talked about with my version of the Zachman layers, or what I call a business architecture pyramid, it's about all of these other areas, all these different areas, be it IT, be it business, be it any functional or operations areas, speaking in the language of their layer, okay? And it's not about technical language. So you are going to have people working in the physical layer or the implementation layer speaking in the language of, well, what does it take to implement this thing? What does it take? What is the infrastructure that is required to support this overall service? What are the processes? And then you have very, very senior people talking about the context. What are the measures? What are the targets? And it's actually about how you translate and join the dots between all of these different types of data. So that's the answer. The answer is, how do you join a piece of data, a measure that is at the contextual or layer, all the way into a keystroke that somebody is typing, that a coder would have to create a validation on, okay? You can absolutely do that through data. So knowing how to do that and actually being able to translate across those layers is exactly the answer. And also, don't forget, you have to translate into the customer and user experience layer as well. So these are aspects of things that I get into. It's not something that you can easily cover in my book, for example, or even talk about. I actually deep dive into specific techniques for how organizations and practitioners can do that inside of my program, because it's the only way, with very, very heavy interaction and a case study example, that you can get into this kind of activity.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us, Paul. Julie, really appreciate. Great interview. Thanks for getting up early and for such a great Q&A session. So thank you. And with that.